Hey guys, welcome back. So today we want to talk about red dot sights, and in particular we want to talk about the Aimpoint P1 and P2 micro sights. Now, several years ago, over 5 years ago, I was talking about red dot sights on handguns. We at Copper were sending out guns for customers to get slide cut for various red dot sights, and I predicted, 5+ years ago, the future for sights on handguns would be red dot sights, much like that came to pass for rifles. 10 years ago, red dot sights weren't all that common. Maybe 15 years ago, weren't all that common on rifles, but they gained in popularity, and militaries use them, our military uses them, and it became accepted. But for whatever reason, the gun community kept pushing back on red dot sights on handguns, saying that iron sights were fine given the fighting distances, and it was a stupid idea. It was a failure point. Don't want anything electronic on my handgun. And people had, really poo-pooed the idea and told me I was nuts. It was never going to happen. Fast forward to 2022. Jason, and just about every major manufacturer has now updated their firearms to include slide cuts so you can mount the red dot sight of your choice.
I know. And it's good. It's really nice to see. I know one of the things that I actually look for when I'm shopping for a handgun or something different is that it is slide cut. Now, whether or not I use it is up to me. That's what I enjoy. It's up to me, the end user, to put a red dot on it if I'd like to. I do like when companies do include the plates and screws. I do think that's a nice touch.
Walther, are you listening?
Well, a lot of companies, are you listening? I find it interesting that there are some companies that in 2022, which are still behind the curve. Steyr, none of their M9 or whatever series of pistols they make are red dot cut at all, and there's no companies that offer any cuts for them. So it's quite interesting to see that there are still companies that just still offer the basic iron sight pistol, but then most companies are all pre-cut for the red dot.
Many of the companies that are lagging now are always the tail end sallies. Mm-hmm. They're the market followers, not the market leaders. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of innovative companies out there, and I'm going to say it. People think I'm a Sig basher. I'm not. I carry Sigs for personal defense, both long guns and handguns. Mm-hmm. I apply so much pressure to Sig simply because I want them to improve their products because they have great ideas. They do things that other companies don't do, and that's called innovation. Mm-hmm. And so Sig, offers pretty much all of their carry guns with slide cuts now.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I look for too.
Yeah. They think it's, the way forward. They're very forward thinking, and of course, they're doing it. But again, most major gun companies are. But the biggest problem I've had with red dot sights is the Reflex Sight. And the Reflex Sight is the open sight. By open, I mean the LED emitter is sitting on one side of the sight, open air, and then the lens that it projects the dot onto is in open air on the opposite end. Mm-hmm. And why is that a problem? Well, for a duty weapon, for say a police officer that's carrying outside the waistband and his sight is exposed to the elements, might go to the ground, fighting, whatever, when they come up, if that thing has scooped up dirt, which it can very easily do, that sight is now useless. Even iron sights, backup sights are now useless unless you can find a way to get your finger in there and clean that out clear enough to see through it. Mm-hmm. Now it's just point fire. Right? And so I've always thought, and this would be an example of that. This is a reflex sight that the emitter's back here, open air, and the lens is up here. It's protected by a hood, so getting in there to wipe that out is
it's literally difficult. Like a shovel. And if you look at it, like it literally has all the provisions to scoop things into it.
And we've done that, right? Mm-hmm. We scooped them in sand, dirt, mud, water, and this is just an inferior design because you don't want that in there for a duty handgun. Now, if you're a concealed carrier, a civilian, you carry a cover garment, you carry inside the waistband, this is going to be more protected from rolling around on the ground or whatnot.
Right.
But maybe some of the viewers would be surprised at the number of people that don't maintenance their carry guns. I have seen people pull out handguns with red dot sights on. They had so much lint on the screen, on the lens, you couldn't see through it.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too. And what's interesting about that is the way the lens is in there for the dot to, function. It's got an extreme curve to it and all like different, angles and shapes. So like getting your finger in there and rubbing, you'd actually be surprised you only do just such a small section inside of there, just the way the lens is actually curved. But the other thing that I noticed with it as well, and I had this happen the other day, in Indiana we can have some really humid days. It almost reminds me of Georgia. And I pulled out from my, safe in the house, air-conditioned home, went outside to shoot, with a buddy of mine on Sunday. And lo and behold, the whole thing is covered in humidity.
Yeah.
And I was like,
And you can't wipe it off easily.
Exactly. So I could take my thumb, I could take a rag, I could wipe it off. But anytime with humidity, if you wipe it, it just comes right back. You have to let it get up to temperature, and then it'll go away on its own. Whereas something like, these Aimpoints, this is kind of nice, is the front screen and back screen are flat, and you can literally with your thumb just wipe anything away. And the screen where the emitter is actually on is still curved where it needs to be, but it's not something you're trying to wipe out with Q-tips.
Right, because it's protected by another lens that makes it flush. And this is something that I've told people, everybody really trashed this sight in the beginning. And I heralded this as the biggest step forward in red dot sight technology to date. And that is the enclosed red dot sight. And everybody's laughed at me and said, oh, you're an idiot. It's, reflex sights are fine. But no, it's not. I mean, Holosun makes the 509T, slightly smaller than this, of a smaller footprint. People call this the mailbox, and rightly so, because when you see it on a handgun, it's a massive hunk of metal.
It is. It's very big looking on that handgun.
And I do believe that they will get smaller. The 509T from Holosun is smaller. I picked up a couple from Primary Arms, and I like them. I have one on a Glock, and, I shoot that. I like them. But I also like Aimpoint, because Aimpoint has a history of building just rock-solid sights. I have no doubt I could drop this thing 20 feet onto concrete and it's still going to work.
Yep.
But the Holosun 509T, they have a titanium housing on various models if you want to pay extra money. And I would imagine that titanium housing is as tough or maybe tougher than the aluminum housing that Aimpoint's using. But that's the P2 I just showed you guys. This is where it all started. This is the P1 ACRO. And this one used, what was the battery size on a 12?
CR1225.
A CR1225, and it has this little tiny battery housing on the side. And on the website, it says that this is good for 1.5 years. So I did a test because I bought 2 of these when they came out because I'm a big advocate of enclosed red dot sights for the reasons you cite. If this thing gets muddy, wet, whatever, humid, I can just wipe off one side. I don't need to see through the sight. All I need to do is be able to see the dot. I can have this one side, the objective side, completely covered in mud. But if I just wipe that away and bring it up and I see a dot, which I would be able to with both eyes open, it acts like the Armson OEG sight, an occluded eye gun sight. Just keep both eyes open, the dot projects onto the target, and you can make your hits. You don't need to see through the sight. You just need to see through the back lens, and that's just to bring it up, wipe it, and start shooting.
That's why the pros and things like that, the front cover is black and the rear cover is clear, because you can immediately bring up with your covers up, be able to use that bend and aiming concept, if you will, and the dot will, with both eyes open, present itself on the target.
Right. So, a lot of people don't know that, and that's something I encourage people to learn because that's a very important aspect of red dot sights.
Right.
But this little guy, they claim 1.5 years of usage. I put it on setting 6, which was bright enough to see, just barely in daylight, and I sat it in my safe, and my P1 ACRO was dead in 4 months. So when they say 1.5 years, that's probably on a night vision setting or like the first visible setting, because at daylight visible settings, it's not going to run 1.5 years. So that was a downside to this. You always had to turn it off. There's no shake wake. There's nothing in this unit that acts to do anything to preserve battery life. So once you turn it on, it's going to stay on, even if it's laying in a safe, and picking it up doesn't turn it back on. So that was a major flaw in this design. Loved the idea. I loved that they were doing it. I have a Swiss-made B&T pistol that had that little tiny red dot sight that's smaller than this one, but it was fixed. They said that it couldn't handle the slide velocity. It's a smaller version. This one's big and beefy because Aimpoint said they had to really ruggedize it so you could put this on heavy recoiling guns like the 460 Roland.
Right.
I would put this on there where, a Holosun would probably get itself beat to death fairly quickly. Maybe, I'm speculating. But this was not inexpensive. It was the right step in the right direction. I was really happy to see it starting to come to pass. They prompted other companies to start copying them. The 509T is a very good example of that. But that tiny battery and short battery life relegated this for me to, second duty. The P1s, I throw it like it's on the LWRC 6.8 right now.
Right. So that's the cool thing about this sight is it's not just relegated to pistols. There are companies that make mounts that you can put this on rifles, which we've done with that 6.8. You can mount this to small Picatinny mounts, if you will, and put it on like the Hellion and things like that. We mounted one of those on the top because it looks pretty cool on there.
There's low pro quick detach mounts for them. There's all sorts of stuff.
Right. So there's a lot of support for these things. So it's nice. And in terms of, like the way I look at Holosun, so I'm one to, I don't necessarily like Chinese made sights. I've always been somebody that's like, I want something else. Just because I've always put that together as it's cheaply made. It's not durable. It's not going to last, and I've had my share of 509Ts that I took them right out of the box. The dot's flickering, or I take it out of the box, and the dot with the, almost like EOTech
style reticle
in it is slightly canted in there. And so I
guess I got lucky with the two I have.
I've just had my share of problems with anything Holosun. And yeah, it does look smaller, but what's funny is and we've noticed this before on things like this red dot, if you were to take and close this one, it doesn't really take up that much more space.
No.
The reason it looks bigger is they just closed it,
right?
And this
try to
looks
explain
smaller
that to
because you got all this cut away,
Right.
So, but in all actuality, it's not that much different.
No, it isn't. And to that point, so Sig once again did something I was really surprised, and we need to show this in a video. So if you watch our Sig P320 X10 video, there's a Sig Romeo 2 on that handgun. That Sig Romeo 2 comes with a kit full of all sorts of stuff. It includes just the basic sight. Then you have metal shields that you can put over the aluminum housing of the sight to ruggedize it, to make it more drop resistant. And then there's a third step that you can do, and that's to put a clear plastic lens that is waterproof. Like I think, what is it, IP6 or something like IP4? There's like a standard for water resistance that meets that standard. And you assemble it with screws. The only downside is I don't like screws on things because screws come loose, but I like what Sig did with that because it gives you the regular reflex sight that's open if you're comfortable with that, but then you can also close it off and seal it and make it more like this. So the Romeo 2 is a really cool sight. I'm running it on the X10. I'm going to see how it takes that recoil. I'm going to see how it holds up because that's an interesting option and competitor to the Aimpoint products.
I like that as well. I think it's interesting that again, here's Sig, like modular handgun with the P320, P365, all this other stuff. Now they're like modular, red dot sights, if you will. They're building them so you can cater them to your wants and needs, which I think is really cool. So,
yeah. And people say, why are you such a Sig advocate now? It's because Sig is doing new and different things, and they're always innovating. They're always pushing the envelope. They're always trying to improve. They don't get it right all the time. The 5.56 was a travesty. The XI was a travesty. And they dumped those products. But when the P320 first came out, it had its issues. The military dumped their first batch. But where we stand now, the P320 is one of my favorite handguns, if not my favorite handgun.
The only downside that I've seen
they're doing
with
with
them
optics
was optics plates. Just because they made so many changes, there's so many different cuts in terms of their optics plates. I think there's revision 2 of certain models, revision 3. You've got this. As a matter of fact, I think I ran into it with the X10. It says on their website that it is cut for RMR and Delta Point Romeo 2 footprint, right? But when I tried to put the RMR on there, none of the screws that I had laying around either in the shop or in the bag fit.
Yeah.
So and so you had to go to a Delta Point because those screws actually went right in there. So
Trichicon's really bad about screws.
Right. And so that's one thing that does a downside to red dots on some of these guns is because if the company doesn't include or there's not a standardization in terms of the thread pitch and screw type, because you got different footprints. Like this Vortex is going to have a different footprint than the Delta Point. The Delta Point, the RMR, the SRO, RMR, and some of the 507. There's so many different.
The ACRO has its own mounting plate.
There's all these different mounting plates and screws and things, but a thread pitch, standardization would be kind of cool.
Pitch and depth would be nice, but maybe in time. Right. So it's kind of like the beta versus VHS war all over again, or it's which one's going to win, because somebody will be a clear victor at some point in the future, much like Keymod and M-Lock. But
so there's those downsides to it, especially if you're getting into red dot sights. That do your research if on a particular pistol. Now I think FN with like this 509 that we have here, they come with like all the plates.
They do
for all the
way it should be.
Right. All the different plates for all the different optics made with the screws right in your package.
Yep.
So that way you could buy whatever red dot you want and mount it on the pistol.
Add the $20 to the cost of the gun, because that's all those plates cost. A lot of them are high density polymer. You know, they're not even machined out of aluminum. Now, one thing I would highly recommend to people looking at putting a red dot sight on a carry gun, and if especially Glock owners, the MOS system is trash.
Yes.
Garbage. Don't use it. Now, there's a company that I buy mounting plates for, and that's where I got the mounting plate for this X-Carry Legion. And you'll notice it has a rear sight on it, and it replaces, when this Sig has multiple different ways that they do their mounting plates, right? Sometimes they leave the rear sight in place, other times they don't. Well, with the X-Carry Legion, when you take the rear plate off, you take the plate off, it takes the rear sight with it. But it's a company called, I always get it wrong, it's CHP, chips. So it's CHPWS. And they make a lot of OEM mounting plates. They usually have a pretty good inventory, but that's what I put on here. And I highly recommend using their mounting plate for the MOS system, because it fixes all the problems with the MOS mounting system. So it's really critical. If you're building a duty type gun, something you're going to depend on with your life, get the right mounting plate. And I highly, highly recommend CHPWS. And that's what I have here on this P2. So the P2 is roughly the same size. Some of the things look a little bit beefier, maybe ruggedized a little bit. They've relocated the buttons on it, but the biggest change was the inclusion of the CR2032 battery. And this gives it a true multi-year capability. They claim 5 years on their website of constant on. That, again, is exaggerated. That has to be at the lowest setting. The most I've ever gotten out of a CR2032 battery is about 2 years.
Okay.
I usually replace them on my carry gun every year, just proactively. Just set a note, a reminder in your calendar when you put it in, put a note in there a year later to replace the battery in your carry gun. And that way you never have to worry about it. And as you said, even though this has a rear sight that works with the Legion, so this is the proper height to work with the sight. So when you look through the dot, it's setting on top of the sights. The sights are perfectly aligned with the CHPWS mounting plate. And it just really works well, and I can still wipe off that rear lens if I need to, so I can see through it. And it's flush on the front as well. It's not recessed. The lens is not recessed like they are on many of these. Like if you look at the lens on this, it's recessed.
Yep, it's down in there.
And so you can't just wipe it off from the outside even. This, you just wipe, and you have your red dot sight completely back, or just wipe and you're back in the fight. So the other features, like we were talking about, here we have the brightness settings on the left-hand side of the original P1. The adjustments are still the same. They're recessed, uses a Torx head for adjustment. They have positive clicks, something you would expect from Aimpoint. Here we have the buttons have been relocated to accommodate the larger battery. And we have the same adjustments with the same Torx head thing. And that's really nice because it's flush. Nothing's going to bump it, move it, or anything. Typically, on my sights that have a raised adjustment knob, I'll put a witness mark on them with a paint pen. So if it ever moves, I can see that it's moved, and I can re-zero the gun. Not necessary with the P1 or the P2 ACRO.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice feature to have those things recessed. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's really stupid that it requires some special tool to... when you buy the sight, it's going to come with the tool in the box that you need to zero it. And most of the time, when you mount this, it's on that pistol and you zero it to the ammunition that you're going to use, and it's going to stay that way.
Yeah.
You're not constantly fidgeting with the thing. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things. And with it being Torx, there's Torx L wrenches all over the place, bits, there's everything you could possibly use. Right. The Holosun uses like this very small, almost flat blade looking thing that is a little awkward.
It's rounded and small.
Special tool, if you will, for
right.
it. So that's one thing, that I like that Aimpoint did, is they used a Torx. But I'm like you. I like these Aimpoints just because I know it's made by a good company. I know it's going to be durable. I know it's going to last. I can wipe these screens off easily. For me, yes, I'd like the P2 for sure. Absolutely. It's the newest and greatest thing out there. The P1s can be bought for pretty cheap now since the P2s come out, but just finding P2s right now is
When they
next
pop
to
in stock,
impossible.
like you'll see them for $587 listed on a website out of stock. When they pop in stock, they'll go from anywhere from $600 to $800 because they're just unobtainium. And I suspect that's supply chain issues.
Right.
Hopefully someday they'll get caught up because the P1s became readily available fairly quickly after launch. It was about 4 or 5 months where you couldn't get them, and then they became readily available. The P2's been out for some time, and they're still unobtainium. The only reason I got one is because a local police department ordered 8 of them. It took over a year for Aimpoint to fulfill that contract, and at that point the police department, they actually went with Holosun. They just went with a completely different red dot sight and trained up on them. And so the dealer down south of Indianapolis that got these in was sitting on 8 of them, and I called him up and said, hey, do you still have one? Because my buddy that was on the department said you might want to call them because they actually have them, because we turned them down, and that's how I got my hands on one. And I got it at dealer cost. And so I love it, right? I wish I had 10 of them because I would start replacing a lot of my red dot sights, but I'm also a big fan of that Sig Romeo too. I'm gonna play with it some more.
That's a nice looking sight. I mean, I'm a big proponent as well. If they're already pre-cut for mounting plates and stuff like that, and they come with them and the screws and everything, that's awesome. I love that. Like you say, the MOS system is trash, and it is trash. The only option, for me, yes, you have companies like CHPWS that make plates, but to me, the best thing to do would be to buy a uncut Glock and send it to a company like Jaeger Works, or there's a few other companies out there that mill the slide to fit the particular red dot sight that you want on there. And then that's what I ended up doing with an M&P. I sent it in and had it cut specifically for an RMR, which I use the SRO on a lot of things.
That's a nice
the way my vision is, the big screen and things, that is something that I enjoy. The RMR's got a lot of fish bowling around on the sides that I don't like,
Very
whereas the
small lens.
SRO is a lot clearer. The
Sage
509T
Dynamics says that the SRO is not a duty quality red dot sight.
I know they do, and I don't. But
I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying.
Right, I know.
I don't think it's ruggedized. That's why they call the RMR ruggedized, miniaturized red dot.
I am not this kind of guy rolling around in the dirt and flopping all over the place. So it's one of those things that is going to work well for me. The 509T has a much bigger screen, I think.
It does.
Than these Acros, which I'd love to see. Is that something that plays into durability? And now I'm speculating here, but with that bigger screen, maybe they take a lot more material away from the sides and it's not as durable.
You have a lot more glass there that can break. It's not as structurally sound the larger it gets.
And the Aimpoint is this is a pretty small window on this thing when I was shooting with it, but
the other thing
it's clear, it's clean. To me,
it presents well. The dot comes up. It's not hard to find. It presents well. The other things that folks might want to know is that it does have a 3.5 MOA dot, which is about the right size for a handgun. Now, I have some red dot sights that are 6 MOA, and at arm's length, that dot, the further away it gets, the bigger the dot gets, and that dot's pretty substantial. So really precision shooting with those 6 MOA dots isn't good. But for self-defense, that bigger dot's faster, easier to pick up. So it's a trade-off, right? I like the smaller dot for precision shooting, and I shoot it enough that where if I have to use it in a self-defense setting, I would be able to. The other thing that's interesting about the the P1 and the P2 ACRO is that not only it uses the standard Torx head that's been coming with T1 micros, T2 micros. It uses that same style Torx head key to not only make adjustments to the windage and elevation, but it's also the same hex that tightens it to its mounting plate. Many other red dot sights, like the Holosuns, I love the 507s. The 507K is a sight that I have on my carry gun, my little P365 XL carry gun. Mm-hmm. I've tested them. I love them. I don't have any problem with them. 5 years ago, I would have said I wouldn't carry a Holosun on a duty weapon or a personal defense weapon. That's changed for me because they've proven themselves for me so far. But this thing is kind of like the ultimate in terms of the enclosed red dot sights, but it does look like a mailbox, and that's what everybody calls it, and that's pretty funny.
It does look big on the pistol. I know when you do add something like that to the slide, you are increasing the reciprocating mass of the gun, so there's definitely, to me, you can have a different felt recoil on your handgun because you have more mass on the slide moving. But I know on something like that X-Carry that your hand holding right there with that infused polymer for whatever
Tungsten
reason.
infused polymer.
I hate to say it because we just did a video not that long ago where I was basically an M&P guy. I have to say that X carry with that that tungsten infused polymer is a really sweet shooting gun.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to go back a little bit, and I have to say that's actually a really nice gun.
So, you know, and you can get holsters made. This is a holster from a local holster company. This is Four Bros. They're right literally down the street from me. I ran over and picked this up. But almost all holsters now will be cut for red dot sights, right? So you'll notice that the Kydex clears. This Kydex is cut in such a way that it won't just clear the P2, it'll clear all the reflex sights out there, the 509T, everything. It gives enough coverage that it works. And I'm a big advocate of Kydex because it holds onto the gun where leather sometimes doesn't. And this one also is kind of cool because you can move the belt loops, the pancake style holster that this is, you can move it up and down to adjust the ride height, to tweak it yourself, and you can also adjust the tensioning on it. But having a good holster is also key to having a good setup for defensive carry, especially if you're using a red dot sight.
Right. Make sure whenever you're doing a holster that they do cut for red dots. And most of them already do. Most of them, they already know the future in terms of red dots on handguns. It's a force multiplier. Like we talk about this all the time. If I can give myself an edge or an improvement on any gun that I have, I'm going to take it. And so putting a red dot on a pistol makes sense to me because we put them on rifles, we put scopes on rifles and things of that nature. This is only a force multiplier on there, just like anything else. So it's going to improve your hits, because the cool thing with it is, depending on how some people shoot with iron sights, you got the folks that say front sight clear, target blurry. You've got all sights clear, target blurry with iron sights. Well, with red dots, you're basically looking right through it. The target's crystal clear and the dot is presented on the target. And it does take some, like when you start first shooting with a red dot, it's a little interesting because you have the people trying to look for it.
They're going up and down with their grip trying to find it. And
right.
The fastest way I can tell them is just look for your sights like you normally would, and the dot will be there.
Right. And so it takes a little bit of training, but, working with your dry fire and, draws and holsters and things of that nature, it becomes just like anything else. Muscle memory with the pistol, or even natural point aim, which I talked about in the other video, where sometimes when I present a pistol, it's just naturally the way the grip angle is, the way everything is cut, that the sights just naturally present the way I push the pistol out.
That's where the P320 is for me.
That's the way that gun is also. This particular X carry is for me. So that dot was able to be found with ease.
Instantly, yeah.
So
this thing is waterproof down to like 35 meters or feet. It also has something that many reflex sights don't have. The earliest, like RMRs, they're pretty early to the market. You had to remove the sight to replace the battery. Then you had to re-zero your gun. This has a battery compartment on the side. Some of the Holosun sights, they have a tray, right? So you don't have to unscrew the sight from the gun to change your battery. You have a tray. I prefer this method. It's O-ring sealed method. This sight, I have no doubt, would probably go to 35 feet plus, given the fact that it's made by Aimpoint. Aimpoint, I think, is
they do
fairly
rigorous.
Modest in how durable they make their optics.
Yeah, they do rigorous testing on their stuff. I know that. But I do have to say, I like that because you can take your mounting plates and put the proper amount of Loctite and torque on your plates. Your plates aren't going to come loose. Your sight's not going to come loose. Every time you take something off and put something on, there's wear that takes place on things. You put Loctite on there, you can re-Loctite, all this stuff. Now it's just fixed. It's on there. The only thing you got to worry about is changing your battery here and there, which is nice. That is a nice feature to not have to take your sight on and off.
Yeah, and it's a big cutout, so you can use a coin, you can use a rim case, you can use whatever to get the battery compartment out of it. So I think that that's the future. I think 5 years now, if we have this discussion again, I think pretty much all red dot sight manufacturers will be offering enclosed options. Holosun's moving that way, Sig's moving that way. Aimpoint moved that way before anybody else, I believe. That's why I was so excited about the P1 and really let down with the wah with the bad battery life. That was just like, oh, come on, Aimpoint, you know better than this.
I know.
It's almost like they rushed it to market. But the P2 fixes all that. That doesn't make anybody with the P1 feel any better. I'm not aware of any exchange program. If you own it, you got it. Just enjoy it. Stick it on a rifle and turn it off when you're done.
I'm buying this one. I mean, just because you can get them relatively cheap, and I shut them off.
And the mounts are the same between them.
Right.
So when the P2s become available and the prices start to come down to normal levels, and you can always replace it with a P2 and stick that on a rifle or something else that you shoot periodically. Absolutely. Yep. So, all right. So I think that, I'm going to give we've never done like a star rating. Maybe we should, like 5 stars. I'm going to give the The P2 ACRO, 4, maybe 4.5 stars. The only thing, this thing weighs like 21 ounces. What does it weigh here? Let me look at it really quick. I think it weighs 21 ounces, so it is a bit heavy, but it's really rugged. And when you see it on the gun, it's awkward. Like the 509T is more visually appealing. But the only reason I take a half star away from that is just because it does look bigger than other competitive products that are on the market. But to me, it doesn't make a difference. It's function. I mean, it can be the ugliest sight in the world, but if it's the best performer, which I believe this is one of the best, if not the best, then I can put up with the ugliness. I think, and the other half a star is because I don't know how long this battery is going to last, right? So I have it on now. I'm going to leave the thing on, and if it dies in 2 years, I'll be happy. If it dies even 1.5 years, I'll still be happy because I replace my batteries every year. So that's just, that half a star is like the unknowns yet because it's such a new product to me. So how would you rate the P2s and the P1s?
So
let's go talk P2 because it's the fixed.
Right. I mean, talking P2, P1, whatever you want to say, to me, I'm kind of on that fence as well. A 4, half a star being removed just because, yes, it is bigger. But like you said, there's the function over form is what you should probably be more concerned about. The other thing to me is I would like to see, me on a personal level, a bigger window of some kind. I would like, because this is a very small viewing window on there.
Right.
And you got all of this support, if you will, all the way around for durability. But to me, a bigger screen to go with it would be nicer.
And Sig did that with their Romeo too. You remember shooting at how big the screen is on it? And it's not much bigger than that when it's fully encapsulated.
So it's one of those things that, like the Delta Point I liked had a big screen. The SRO, big screen.
Yeah.
I even think the Romeo 2, if you will, that's got a pretty big screen.
It's got a really good lens size on it. Yeah.
So I would like to see a bigger screen of some kind to it, and I would like to see them a little less mailbox, if you will.
Yeah, I'm good with the mailbox. I think I would like to see this miniaturized even more. I think that they can make this smaller, keep the same lens size, maybe make it even a little bit bigger, but it needs to come down in size a little bit. And I think that'll probably be what the P3 is. Aimpoint, again, the reason I said this thing is so big and bulky is because they went for rigidity, ruggedness.
Exactly.
I mean, I could take this thing right now and huck it at the wall as hard as I can, and I guarantee you it won't lose zero and it won't break.
Yep, it'll be fine.
And so there's a trade-off there. And so I think they're just working through the evolutionary changes to get to that point. And I think the P3 will probably be more to our liking, but the P2, totally happy with it. It does look funny on the gun. People are going to make fun of it, but they can laugh all they want. I think it's the best enclosed red dot sight on the market right now.
Yes.
And it has been the trendsetter, and everybody else is now following in Aimpoint's footsteps.
Yep, I agree.
All right, guys, I'd look forward to your comments down below. How would you rate the P1 or the P2 ACRO? I know many of you would like to get a P2 but haven't been able to. You're probably still rocking those P1s. Or maybe you're looking at picking up a red dot sight and you've been looking at the P1s, P2s, and you have mailbox syndrome. You're like, that thing's just too big. Let us know what you think. Rate the sights down below in the comments section. I look forward to those comments. We'll probably stick around, well, we usually do, for the first day or so after a video goes live, and we do read through those comments, and we look for content for future videos, and we try to answer any questions you guys may have. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best possible way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash that join button, and you can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, swing by, check out coppercustom.com. Thank you guys for 14 years of support. We love you all. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, guys.